Two journalists caught in two different conflicts, transformed unexpectedly into war reporters. One from Ethiopia, the other Ukraine. When war broke out, they were faced with the task of not just reporting while fearing for their safety and that of their families and their countries, but with doing the job rigorously and objectively, regardless of which side they were reporting on. Anna Mironyak works with the Kyiv Independent. A few months into Russia's war on Ukraine, she found herself investigating a new military unit launched by President Zelensky, the International Legion.
I investigated Russia's war crimes, atrocities like rape and torture. There were many stories like that. And then a source came and brought this tip about some mismanagement in the International Legion. There is a convicted criminal who is wanted at his home country in Poland and who is now serving in the leadership. It was too strange to be true. So then, we started investigating, finding out more.
We're not going to be implicated by any means as leaders. We will not stand this.
Понимаешь? Приказ. Это армия. Приказ.
Theft, physical threats with a gun, sexual harassment of female medics. This story was among the most difficult choices in my life. Because on one hand, you are a Ukrainian, right? And you know that your army is protecting you. And at the same time, there are some people who are abusing the situation and doing some shady dealings while nobody is watching.
The story made a splash, and not just because of what it exposed, but because it was such a rare example of a Ukrainian outlet investigating its own military. So rare, in fact, that Kyiv Independent issued an op-ed defending their decision to publish.
People were saying that we, by doing this story, were helping Russian propaganda machine. But my response to that is that Russia can turn anything into propaganda. The purpose of journalism is not sugarcoating Ukraine's realities, is basically, showing Ukraine as it is. I am patriotic, but this story was done out of patriotism, because I believe that shedding light on the military is helping the military, not hurting it.
If there's something that we would say is emblematic about corrupted journalistic treatment of wars, it's silence. It's not talking about the atrocities on our side, leaving the field open to only report on the atrocities of the other side. It's much easier to do public relations, in effect, than to really dig deep and illuminate truth, no matter how difficult or upsetting it might be for whoever.
It's something that any journalist might struggle with, whatever the conflict, wherever it may be. In 2020, a war broke out in Ethiopia between the government, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and the former de facto leaders of the country, the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, or TPLF. Lucy Kassa extensively covered the civil war, a brutal conflict that claimed an estimated 600,000 lives. Her first investigation began after she received information directly contradicting the government's narrative.
The Prime Minister was saying this is just a law enforcement operation. There was no civilian casualty. But I started to meet people who managed to flee from Tigray, and they told me the true picture of the war. I started to receive cases of sexual violence and killings, and I was shocked to have this information in my hand because of the terrible human rights abuses that I never imagined in my life. I didn't really think whether I have to report. It was intuitive.
Kassa's intuition was unusual. As a member of the minority ethnic group, the Tigrayans, Kassa's readers would have expected her to criticize the government. But when she started reporting war crimes on the other side, those of the TPLF, she crossed the line few reporters dared to, and she's paid the price. She now lives in exile.
I wasn't aware of my ethnicity until I started living in Addis. I believe that way helped me to report objectively in this war. Otherwise, I could find it very difficult. Hiding the truth won't help anyone. So eventually what comes out is the truth, like both sides committed the crimes.
The people who are citizens of a country or live there, they're in a real bind when the country goes to war. They're supposed to be true to the journalistic ethos that you seek the truth, no matter where it goes. Well, during war, there's a lot of reason to fear. Retribution, anger, retaliation. That's an incentive for the journalists, frankly, to trim their sails, go along with the flow, be blown with the propaganda wind of their own government. And unfortunately, journalists usually succumb to the pressure.
It's an age-old battle. The idiom, "the first casualty of war is truth," was coined back in 1917, specifically referencing the constraints of war reporters.
This country is at war with Germany.
In the pre-digital age, censorship was much easier. Governments could control the spread of information and often denied journalists access to the front lines. As technologies advanced, access for journalists increased.
This is what the war in Vietnam is all about.
It allowed them to document and disseminate information unlike anything seen before, often revealing the horrifying realities of war.
The Marines have burned this old couple's cottage.
Yet the impact of this kind of investigative war reporting can seem intangible at times. While shocking details have been uncovered from countless conflicts, the revelations often take a lot of time to shift national attitudes or to help bring the fighting to an end. For those telling these stories, the burden of the work with its challenges and dangers is heavy, and many are still waiting for the reporting to make the difference it should.
So there were messages that were passed to us from military intelligence, which basically said they disliked it. Unfortunately, our reporting didn't lead to these commanders being removed from their positions, but the situation did change. Our story was published, and then stories investigating domestic issues started appearing, which I believe is a good sign for Ukraine and for Ukraine's freedom of speech and democracy.
It has created a huge impact. If it wasn't because of the investigations we journalists did, the war might have continued. I think it has forced the international community to pressure this warring sides into negotiation and sign peace deal. The Prime Minister office released the statements that I am not a journalist, and then they opened a huge online hate campaign, and like physically I was attacked when I was in Addis, and then I had to flee because of this.
There are moments that were vital in reporting on war, but very few of them were turning points, because the essence of propaganda is repetition, and the exceptions are just that. They're exceptional. The higher calling of journalism involves a deeper kind of patriotism, that your own country should be governed by truth rather than lies or deceptions or partial truths. And as much as we might despair about the shortage of such reporting, the fact that it exists makes the difference between a complete crushing of democratic possibilities and leaving those doors open.